Hi, I'm Brendan with the Office of the Vice President of Research, here to talk to you about getting started with Unity. So what is Unity? Unity is a free-to-use game development engine, however it can be used for much more than just games. Most XR projects on campus are currently utilizing this engine or the Unreal Engine, which is an alternative option to Unity, but with a similar feature set. For this workshop, we will be learning the absolute basics of Unity. It is a very complex program with a vast number of features, way too many to go over in one workshop. Unity Hub is going to be the primary place where you actually launch the Unity project and acts as a manager for the Unity engine and a launcher for projects and the editor. When you first download and open Unity Hub, you may be prompted to log in or create an account when opening. This is all free, so don't worry about the pricing. First off is the Projects panel on this left side. This section shows all the projects currently on your PC or on the collaboration cloud that you have access to. The Add button allows you to find a Unity project that isn't appearing under the Projects section, such as from an external drive. The New button allows you to create a new Unity project. If we go down here to Learn, this section is a collection of various basic Unity resources to help you learn the basics of Unity, including a in-game editor, as well as a bunch of their great tutorials online, and the various other resources you may need, and some helpful links. The Installs section is where you can see all the different versions of Unity you have installed. You may want more than one version in some cases in order to prevent data loss and compatibility issues. The Locate button lets you find an editor that is not currently listed. Again, if you have plugged in an external drive or you have an older version that you haven't used in a while. If we click Add, you'll see a pop-up window asking what version you'd like to install. Once you select your version and click Next, you'll be asked to which modules you'd like to add to this install of Unity. Unity supports a wide array of target platforms from mobile to PC and Mac to web. Click Done to begin the installation. As I already have it installed, I'm not going to do this. For now, we are going to go back to the Projects panel and click New. Here you'll see an array of different templates as well as the project settings. Unity supports both 2D and 3D development. You also notice a few items with the Render Pipeline, or RP. These options are for 3D applications that want to utilize Unity's Render Pipeline, which allows users to take advantage of the built-in shader editing program and post-processing options, as well as a bunch of other different rendering options. For now, we're just going to use the basic 3D template, so just make sure you have this selected. Next, under the project name, just type in Demo, or whatever suits your needs. Under Location, select the directory you wish to save the project to by selecting the three dots. Next, you'll click Create. It will take Unity a moment to prepare everything and get the project ready to use. Once Unity is loaded up, you'll notice a couple of different viewports. It can all be somewhat intimidating at the beginning. Your setup may not look the exact same as mine right now, as all of these viewports can be moved. First off, you will see the Scene view. This is a 3D workspace that shows your objects relative to the X, Y, and Z planes. Next up is the Hierarchy. The Hierarchy shows a list of all the game objects currently in the loaded scene. By default, you should only see two items, a main camera and a directional light. These are both two things that Unity builds at the creation of every scene and will be imported into every scene you ever build. Next is the Project panel. This area shows all of your game assets, regardless of whether they are in the current scene or not. This is also going to be the primary way to navigate between different scenes and accessing assets not currently loaded into a scene. The Inspector window. The Inspector window is a contextually sensitive window. Here you will see the properties and components of objects selected in either Hierarchy or Project panels, i.e. if I select the main camera, I can see all of the different settings that are currently applied to that camera and adjust them as needed. Next is the toolbar. The toolbar has various functions and selections for manipulating objects in the scene, as well as the debugging tools, Run, Pause, and Step. Other viewports can be accessed depending on needs by going through the Window menu. If you select Window, and then you can find all of the other ones you might need, such as general, rendering, or any other options that might come up during your creation process. As I had mentioned before, you are able to move around these different viewports if you so choose. They are completely modular and you can scale them and move them around as possible. I'm going to keep mine as I have them, as that's the way I've decided, but feel free to play around with different orientations that fit your needs best. We will start by setting up a basic scene using Unity's built-in game objects. First, you're going to want to navigate to your hierarchy, right-click, and you will see a menu pop up. We will go to 3D Object and select Cube. You should see a white cube in the scene view now. If you don't, select the cube from the hierarchy panel, hover over the scene view and press F to focus on it. You can scroll to zoom, press the middle mouse button to pan, right-click and drag to rotate your view, and you can use left-click to select objects in the scene. In the hierarchy, we'll create a few more objects the same way we made the cube. First, we're going to want to right-click, go to 3D Object, and select Plane. You may notice in this area that the position is not exactly at 0. You can reset this two ways. First, by clicking into each individual box and pressing 0, or if you go to this gear icon and click Reset, it'll reset the transform. I suggest doing that so that everything is at 0, 0, 0, so we can move them where we want when we need to. Now the cube should be in the middle of the plane. To move it, you can either select the cube in the scene view or in the hierarchy. You'll notice here as well the position is set to not the origin, i.e. 0, 0, 0. We'll go ahead and reset this real quick. Next, we're going to want to set the cube to the proper position. We're going to want to move this Y position to 1. This can be done by moving the cube via handles in the scene view, i.e. these triangular pointers. We can move it up, but that won't necessarily be as accurate as we want. The other option is to enter it manually into the inspector view. You also see rotation and scale values, which further adjust the cube's presence in our scene. You can add these values in the inspector or through the scene window by using the toolbar to switch between position, rotation, scale, up here, or the keyboard shortcuts of W for position, E for rotation, and R for scale. As I select through them, you'll notice that the tool handles change. Now, let's create more objects: a sphere, another cube, and a cylinder. We'll do this the same way that we created the other ones. Let's start with the sphere. We're going to set this sphere's position to 2, 3, 0. Next, we're going to create another cube. Let's set this position to 0, 3, and then 0. Next, let's create a cylinder. We will set this position to -2, 1, and 0. And we'll go ahead and adjust the scale of this as well. We'll set it to 1, 0.5, and then 1. Now, we can click the Run button up here to see all of the game objects in real time. So if we had any type of physics objects or any type of interactions, we would see them now. However, right now we just have a static scene. The other option is to also go to the game view where you'll see a preview. However, since nothing is running, no interactions will take place. Now, our hierarchy panel is getting a little cluttered. We have 2 different cubes, we have a couple of these other planes, but then we also have this directional light and this main camera. So why don't we go ahead and clean this up a little bit. We'll start by creating an empty game object the same way that we make everything else. You'll click on this Create Empty. Now, we're going to want to rename this because having it just labeled as game object won't necessarily cue us in as to what this is. If we want to rename this, you can either double click it twice or you can go up to the inspector. We'll go ahead and rename this environment. Now that we have our empty game object environment set up, we can set all of the other objects except for the main camera and the directional light as children of the game empty object. This way it allows us to organize the same way that folders do in a directory. If you select all of them and click and drag, you'll now see that there is this drop-down icon. This will allow you to cycle between seeing and not seeing these. All of these are now contained within this empty game object. Now that it's all cleaned up, we're starting to get on the right track, although our environment could use some sprucing up. Right now we have nothing but white objects. Navigate down to the Project panel and select your Assets folder. Right-click and choose Create Folder. It's exceptionally important to use proper file management when working with Unity, otherwise you will end up with a massive headache further down the line. We're going to name this new folder Materials. Let's go ahead and open that folder that we just made. And then we're going to right-click, choose Create, and find Material. We're going to name this one Red. We'll select that, and in the inspector window we should have all of our options. The most important settings to know about are albedo, which can either be a color or a texture image, the metallic and smoothness property, which define how metal-like the substance is or how smooth it is, the normal mapping, which is a secondary image that helps create 3D effects on textures. For now, we'll just set the albedo to red. Go ahead and just click and select a nice red. You'll see in this area we have a preview of what the material might look like. Let's go ahead and change the color of our second cube. We can do that in a couple of ways. We can click and drag the red material in the project panel to the cube in either the scene view or the hierarchy. So if we select cube 1, we can either click and drag here to change it, or the other option is to click and drag directly into the scene. You will see that as I hover over things, they will preview. Once I release, it'll apply the changes. Now, let's click Run. You'll see that the changes have now taken into effect into our actual game preview. It's starting to look better, but it could still use a little more. Let's create a new folder in the project panel under the Assets folder. Create Folder. We're going to name it Texture. Go ahead and open Texture. Now, here we have prepared some external assets for you to use. If you go to this link, http://bit.ly/OVPR demo assets, you should see this folder with two different images in it, one labeled as normal, one not. I've already downloaded these, but you can go ahead and download them for the purposes of this demo. Now, once these have been downloaded, you're going to want to open the file download location. You're going to select both of these images and click and drag them down to the texture folder. This will import both of them as textures for this project. Next, we want to go back to our materials folder and create a new material, same way that we have before. We're going to name this Brick. Now, we have two different options. We can either click and drag the brick texture into the albedo, or you can click on this little target icon and select it from this pop-up window. You'll see here that we have a preview that starts to show our brick. It is still looking a little flat though. This is where the normal map will come in. We'll do the same thing with the normal map. Again, you can either click and drag, or you can select this target and select the normal map. You will notice that in the inspector for our bricks, you will now see an error that says this texture is not marked as normal map. You can either choose Fix Now to fix this problem, or you can go to your texture folder and select the texture brick normal and apply the proper settings. Under the texture type, we're going to select normal and then click Apply. Now if we go back to our brick asset in the material folder, that error should now go away. The normal map will give our texture more depth than just the flat image. You may need to edit the images in order to make them look as best as possible in a program like GIMP or Photoshop. Now, we're going to want to take this brick texture and apply it to the other white cube. We will do this the same way that we did previously. If we zoom in on the cube, we can now see that it has an illusion of depth and texturing. If we click Run, we can again see this in real time. It's starting to look better. However, it's very static. Let's add some basic physics interaction. Start by selecting the sphere in either the hierarchy or the scene view. In the inspector, you should see a few different components. The mesh filter, this gets the mesh component for an object. The mesh renderer, this renders the mesh in the mesh filter for display. The sphere collider. Colliders are invisible volumes that are used to detect when objects touch each other. They are one of the main ways in which game interaction happens. We will need to add a component to use the built-in Unity physics engine. Scroll down and select the Add Component button. We're going to want to search for rigid body. The rigid body will handle all the physics interactions in Unity. Let's click on the rigid body component. Double-clicking will automatically add it to the object. In the inspector, make sure the Use Gravity bool is selected. Next, we can hit Run, and you'll see that the sphere will fall. But what if we want a closer look? Currently, our camera is stuck into one spot. We aren't able to actually move it around. We can add in some scripting to control its position, or we could always change it in the inspector, but instead we'll use the Asset Store. Open the Asset Store. You may either see it next to your Scene panel, or you might have to go to Window and select Asset Store. Here you will see the Unity Asset Store, where you can browse for various paid and free assets uploaded by the Unity community. You can also access the Asset Store from a web browser. Click on the search bar at the top and type in Standard Assets. It is worth looking around the Asset Store from time to time to see what is available, but for now we just want the basic package. The Standard Assets package by Unity Technologies should be the first one on the list. Click on it. Once the page loads, you should see several preview images/videos, the package details, reviews, and a description of the assets. Click on the Import or Download button. Unity will begin preparing the assets for you. I have already downloaded this to my machine, so I'm only seeing the Import button. A pop-up window should appear with a list of various components contained within the assets package. You can pick and choose which assets you want to import here, but for now, we'll just import all. Click on the Import button. Unity will take a moment to get your assets ready for you. Next, we'll want to go back to the scene view. Select the main camera in the hierarchy. Up here, we're going to click on this checkbox to deactivate it. Now if we go to Game View, you won't see anything. In the Assets folder, you're going to want to select Standard Assets. Next, we'll want to navigate to Characters, First Person Character, Prefabs, and FPS Controller. Drag this asset into the scene view. Next, we're going to want to set its position to 0, 0.5, and -2. Click Play. You'll see now that we can use our camera to look around and the WASD keys to move. This is pretty typical video game interactions. Now, just be careful of the edge because we can fall off. The FPS controller is referred to as a prefab. Prefabs are pre-built assets that can be duplicated multiple times in the editor and instantiated via scripts. Let's create basic prefabs using our 2 cubes. Under the Assets folder, let's create a new folder named Prefabs. Then, we'll want to open up the Prefabs folder. Let's click and select this red cube. Let's click and drag this into the Prefabs folder. You'll notice the cube object turns blue in the hierarchy because it is now a prefab instance. Let's do the same thing with the brick cube. Now, having them named Cube and Cube 1 becomes a bit arbitrary. Let's name them what they actually are. Let's rename the cube to Brick Cube, and the Cube 1 to Red Cube. You'll notice that the 2 cubes in the original environment do retain their previous names. Let's click and drag the red cube from the Prefabs folder into the scene. You now should have 2 red cubes in the scene. Prefabs are a very powerful and useful tool for development. Changes done to a prefab will affect all instances of the object. If we change the red cube material, for instance, to blue, you'll notice that all the red cubes in our scene change colors. These are the very basics of Unity to get you started. Unity is a diverse tool that can be used for a wide range of purposes. I recommend viewing the Rollerball tutorial for even more information on getting started with Unity. You can also view the Unity documentation for both the editor and scripting API for information on any Unity component. Join us next time to see how to implement virtual reality into Unity.